Welcome to the Highland Heights Sunday morning Bible class. We are starting a new series this week, so if you're joining us for the first time, I guess you don't have to go back and watch the old Bible classes, but you could if you wanted to. So we just finished about 13 weeks going through the church. We spent the first, 9 weeks looking at Acts chapter 2, and then we spent the last 4 weeks talking about how we today continue to be a remnant of the church, that we are called to persist even when it seems like we are alone, even when we are alone. So it was a good quarter, but the 13-week quarter is done, so we're going to start something new. Jeremy, we are starting up an apologetics series. So how long are we planning on going here?
We've got 9 weeks laid out, but I think we were talking a while ago, we can add a couple more to that. And if we want to really sink our teeth into something, we can go farther.
Yeah, I don't think it's scriptural to not go 13 weeks.
So. I don't know. As we saw, Peter only went like a few minutes in Acts 2, or one day actually, but
we're really getting off topic here. Yes. But it's really great in Acts. We see that often non-believers will interrupt sermons. And just be, if you're offended, just interrupt it and you say, all right, we're done here. Okay. Well, all right. So we got 9 weeks scheduled. I think we were talking about a few more weeks. So I'm sure we'll stretch this out. Of course, we also hope that we are able to get back to live Bible classes as soon as possible. But until it does, we will continue to be here. So let's go ahead and start talking about apologetics. So what is apologetics? Is it when I ask my children to apologize to each other when they do something bad? What is it?
Well, it's definitely not when you ask your children to apologize to one another when they do something bad. Because, in the first place, we want apologetics to actually mean something and be truthful. And, when a toddler apologizes, they're lying. So, it's definitely not that. But it doesn't involve the idea that we think of when we talk about apologizing today. It does have the same root word, the Greek word apologia. But what apologia means is to make a defense. Okay. So what we're talking about is making a defense of what we believe. Okay. It's this idea of laying out reasons, laying out evidence, making your case as it were. And kind of the key verse, and this was the verse my apologetics course in college started off with. We started off with 1 Peter 3:15, which Peter picks up and says, "But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is within you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame." So, and the word make a defense there, it is apologia, or a form of the word apologia, making a defense. And you look in this verse, and what Peter has in mind is someone comes to you and says, why do you live differently? Why do you live with hope? Why do you do things differently? Why don't you eat meat sacrificed to idols? Why do you go meet with your brothers and sisters on Sunday? Why do you refuse to worship the gods? Okay. Why are you doing all of these things? And Peter says, always be ready to give an answer to those questions. Okay. My apologetics professor, Dr. Ralph Gilmore at Freed Hardeman, he called this verse the steak and the sizzle of apologetics. Okay, because you think about you're going to grill steak. Okay, don't lose me and get hungry yet. You're going to grill a steak. It's that sizzle. If you got that sizzle and that pop and that smell, see, and that really makes you hungry and get your mouth watering. Okay, but that doesn't feed you. Okay, the gentleness and the respect, that describes the attitude we take it to people with. Okay, you want to give an answer, but again, as we've talked about before, the goal is to save souls, not to win the argument. Now, are you going to need to win the argument to save the soul? Yes, but the goal is to save the soul. So do it with gentleness and respect, but the make a defense, that's the steak, that's the meat. Having a reason, knowing why we believe what we believe. and knowing why it's true. So that's the idea we're talking about, is being prepared to say, this is why I live differently.
Yeah, so the preparation is kind of the reason why we're doing the class. When in verse 15, he says, be prepared to make a defense. So it's not hear someone's question and go research it. It's the other way around. It's research the questions that are likely to come. And Peter's writing this in the first century, and there's already arguments that are coming up. Jesus hasn't been gone too long before people start coming up with, we would consider heresies, wrong teachings about him, or outside groups, people that don't claim to be Christians at all, who are promoting ideas that are basically saying that Jesus was a liar. The church is built on lies. And so being able to defend, offering the best defense possible, is reason enough to study it. And Peter also here is talking about the suffering that Christians will inevitably get into. And because we know we are going to suffer, we need to know why we're suffering. If you're going to be forsaken by your friends, if you're going to lose that promotion at work, if you're going to have relationships that are torn up because of faith, you need to make sure that you actually believe the things that you are proclaiming, the things that you're saying. And so if you get to that devastating moment when you are being confronted, when you have the potential to lose something that's large on this side of heaven, if you don't actually believe, if you don't know the reason why, you might be a little more likely to fall away, to give up your faith in order to keep that earthly thing that you love so much. So we need to be ready to have that faith. Let me go ahead and talk about, before we get into more of the meat of what we're going to be talking about, just want to put a few books on screen. The one whose table of contents we're going to follow is this one by Lee Strobel, The Case for Faith. If you've heard of him for other reasons, you've likely heard of his better selling book, The Case for Christ. Both are very good. This one, we use this one as one of a few textbooks in Life for Christ class back in my college days. Both very good books. I would put up one other book, The Reason for God by Tim Keller. If you're interested in following along, and we're going to talk 30 minutes about these. These are more, kind of a college class or a graduate lesson on each of these different topics. All of these good, plus many more, are worth your time and consideration. If you look, there are resources for all of these things that we're going to talk about. So don't just take our word for it. Do your own research. And these are conversations worth having with family. So let's continue to develop this idea of, is the Christian faith worth defending? Is there substance there? Or are we, as one person put it a long time ago, are we just moralistic, therapeutic deist, that we believe that, yeah, Christianity is good for living a good life, makes me feel good, and I got to believe in something, so why not that?
Well, I mean, I hope it can be defended, because we're commanded to defend it. I mean, so at the bottom line, if it can't be defended, God is asking us to do something that can't happen.
Well, I can defend a lie all day, but we would lose if it's not true. Exactly.
And that's the point, is we have to keep coming back to the idea that this is true. And that's a core concept where it's going to come up time and time and time again. And
also the non-Christian will go here too. Think about Acts chapter 5. Gamaliel, perhaps the wisest of rabbis, says to the council, if this is true, we can't defeat it. But if it's not true, just let it die. Yeah. And what he means by let it die is it's going to lose every argument. It's not, people will not believe it because they won't give up their lives for something that they just don't find any substance to. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The first thing we need to remember is we need to stop allowing people to put faith in opposition to reason. Faith is the core of reason. if you look in the Bible, especially today, it does not ask us to blindly leap. Okay. Now, it asks us to accept that what is in the Bible is true. And it's interesting, one of the running themes you see throughout the New Testament, and this is a key point, especially in the book of Acts, is they are constantly grounding their proclamation in truth. Okay. They are constantly grounded. And what I mean here is the fact that these things actually happen. Okay. 1 Corinthians 15, Paul said, he's talking about the resurrection. He says, look, if this didn't happen, and what he's referring to there is not some sort of amorphous, spiritual, consciousness raising, spiritually, figuratively raised from the dead type of thing. Okay. That's not a new age. It's not a new agey thing like that. He is talking about the literal, physical, bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay. And what he says is, if that didn't happen, this is all pointless and this is useless. And let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Okay. And at the beginning of 1 Corinthians 15, he grounds it in a series of historical appearances of the resurrected Lord. First, he appeared to Peter to Cephas, and then to James, and then to the 12, and then to more than 500, some of whom have fallen asleep, but most of whom remain. And then last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared to Paul. He appeared to Paul. Okay. So the Bible is providing evidences. Think back to when 15 weeks ago when we started Acts chapter 2. Peter lays out evidence for his proclamation. He doesn't just say, Jesus is Lord and Christ, feel it in your heart. He says, Jesus is Lord and Christ, okay? And that's the conclusion of Jesus did miraculous signs. Jesus was prophesied by the prophets. He was put to death according to the foreknowledge of God. He was raised from the dead. He is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. The tomb is empty. We saw him not dead, okay, after he was dead. All of that is evidence. Paul does something similar in Acts chapter 13. In Pisidian Antioch, again, speaking to Jews. Paul also does something similar, although he approaches it differently. Okay, we're not talking about the specific evidences here so much as Paul offering a reasoned argument in Acts chapter 17. Okay, now it doesn't look the same in Acts 17 as it does in Acts 13 or in Acts chapter 2, because in Acts 2 and Acts 13 he's talking to Jews, in Acts 17 he's talking to Gentiles. You wouldn't go to Gentiles and say, Paul, it was prophesied by the Jewish prophets, because they don't know the Jewish prophets. But it's still a reasoned argument. Even in the chapter we think of as the definition of faith, okay? Hebrews 11 is a long list of reasons why you can trust God to bring about his plan. Well, how can we trust God to bring about his plan? Because look at all the ways he brought about his plan in the lives of all these people. Boom, 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 boom. Now we today have all of the evidence. Okay. So God is asking us to trust him. Can you definitively 100% prove God in the same way that you can prove somebody is physically standing in front of you right now? It's two different kinds of proof there.
Yeah.
But when you look at the way God lays things out, he says, trust me. Well, God, why should I trust you? Look at what I did. I've earned your trust. And again, that puts the historical accuracy of what we're saying square at the forefront of what we're arguing. But the Christian faith is built on a foundation of reason, or at least of reasons.
So Tim Keller will have people ask him about this, and one of the questions he often gets is, well, give me a watertight argument. Give me a foolproof case give me the one thing that cannot be refuted. And his response there is, God did not give us a foolproof argument or a watertight case. He gave us a watertight person. He gave us a reality, someone that existed, and it's no longer about making arguments one way or the other. It's about saying, consider this man. How do you react to Jesus? And so I think it's important for us to say that We could and perhaps should, if this pandemic goes on forever, maybe we do case for Christ later. The case for Christ, when we're talking about the historicity of Jesus, it's a kind of a different argument in that we are presenting Jesus. And we're saying, here's who he was. He's real. And because of the reality of God become man, we have to react to that. Everyone who ever existed has to react to Jesus. It's an interesting concept. Do people before Jesus react? Anyway, we can talk about that later. So on the other hand, though, apologetics, at least the way that we're going to treat it for this quarter, is, the case for faith is more looking at the questions that outsiders bring in. So it's not necessarily what we lead with. In fact, part of some of the questions we're going to talk about are uncomfortable. They're not easy. And one of the things about these questions is that Christians, especially when they're developing their faith, will sometimes encounter these questions and not be prepared for what might come out on the other side. Because they didn't know about some of the arguments that are made against Christians, they'll throw up their hands and say, whoa, I didn't realize that I was signing up for this. Now, we're not saying that everyone who goes down into the waters of baptism needs to have perfect answers before they begin their faith. But we as a Christian community should prepare not just young people coming of age, but all Christians of all ages. How am I ready for this? How do I prepare myself to answer these questions? Let me go ahead and offer up one other idea as we're talking about why these apologetics are necessary. Another idea that Keller brings up is that apologetics are necessary both for Christians and for non-Christians. The reason why Christians need to know apologetic arguments, need to know the reason for their faith, is because if you don't, that's unmerciful. If you're telling someone about your faith, that I love Jesus, you should believe in him too, you should join me in the church through baptism, but you can't answer their basic questions. You can't answer their questions for why is this true? It's ungracious. It's unloving of us as Christians to not be prepared to answer those questions. On the other hand, if your friend or a coworker, or maybe even a family member, is an agnostic or an atheist, it's important for them too. You might have a coworker who says, I don't believe, so why would I even look at it? Why would I even consider something that I don't believe to be true? I'm not going to spend any time with it. Perhaps one of the retorts we can make there, one of the ways that we can bring them in to study with us, is to say, if you really believe that this is not true, yet at the same time you believe that we as the human race need to be enlightened, we need to know what really is true, and I think that many atheists are seeking after what really is true, well, then you need to know the best arguments of the dominant thought process of the past 2,000 years. What has developed the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the Reformation and so many other big ideas. Science itself is based off of Christian ideas, so why not know the best ideas that they have to offer? So, is Christianity reasonable? Is it reasonable to have this faith? That's the sort of argument that we're having to build up to. The argument for Jesus himself is foundational. And so we're not going to talk about this now, but sometimes I wonder, do you start with Jesus or are we getting to Jesus? And it kind of depends on the person too and their background. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. Okay. Sorry, we're going to run out of time. We've got, 10, 15 minutes left. All right. Okay. So let's talk about the types of people that we will come into contact with. You mentioned at the beginning that, we're not looking to win arguments. We're looking to win souls. We're looking to bring people to Jesus. And I think sometimes as Christians, we run into issues, especially when we're dealing with other Christians too. And we start to question the question. We start to question the genuineness of what the person is bringing up. So, Jeremy, how do we guard ourselves from not being unkind, but charitably considering the questions that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks?
Well, I think I think in some cases, when we run, especially when we run into questions we're not familiar with, we get scared.
Yeah.
Or we think, well, that's not a real question, or well, I don't see why that's an issue, or why can't you figure that out, or I figured that out years ago. Which, by the way, those are not 1 Peter 3:15 answers. Okay, and so we make the mistake of either, like you said, thinking the questioner isn't being genuine, or we're made uncomfortable by the question. Maybe that's because we were raised with an attitude of we don't ask those kinds of questions here.
Right.
And look, we should, if we truly believe this is truth, we shouldn't fear the questions. You brought up Gamaliel earlier, and that's a great example of, look, if this is truth, then the reasonableness of it will show eventually. So we need to keep that at the forefront of our minds, is if this is truth. And if it's not truth, why are we continuing? Okay, and just to hasten to point out here, I'm not, Michael, I'm sure you wouldn't say Christianity isn't true. We're doing this to bolster the case that Christianity is truth, okay? But that's our goal, is we are seeking after truth, okay? So don't be afraid of the questions. Now, are we always necessarily going to know the answers? No, okay? I taught a course in apologetics last school year, and one of the things I kept at the forefront of my mind was something my dad tried to do when he was teaching apologetics in high school, back when I was not in high school. He said what he wanted to do was teach the kids apologetics, but also to teach them in such a way that even if they didn't remember every jot and tittle of the argument, they remembered that there was another side out there.
Right.
Okay. And so that's we need to remember that. And look, many of these questions, they are reasonable questions, okay? It could also be a question that's not reasonable. Doesn't matter. We owe it to the questioner, to ourselves, and to the gospel to be prepared to give an answer, or to be prepared to go find an answer. The other reason I think we get uncomfortable sometimes is people are coming at these questions. Okay, we're going to deal with the several issues involving pain and suffering. Is God a just God? Things like that. There's emotion built in that question. Okay, the case for faith, which we're going to use that as kind of the table of contents, as kind of our outline. The opening chapter of that, Lee Strobel goes and interviews Charles Templeton. I think check the name on that for me, but I believe it's Charles Templeton. I don't remember his name, but I remember the story. But he was, I'll continue with the story while Michael's confirming the name. He was once a co-worker with Billy Graham. And then because of the problem of evil and suffering, he turned his back. And at the end of the chapter, Strobel asks him a form of a question like, do you miss Jesus? And Templeton says, yes, absolutely, I miss Jesus. It was an emotional question. And we need to acknowledge that these are questions that are going to have a lot of emotion built into them. They're going to need a lot of sensitivity in addressing them. Okay? So, unless, well, like we said last week, unless we've got a reason to question the questioner, don't. Mm-hmm. Okay? There needs to be gentleness and respect. Peter says that. We need to approach this with a sense of gentleness and respect in how we talk to these people. And again, remember, look, they're searching for truth. They're searching for answers. We have those answers. Okay? It is not loving to blow that off because it's uncomfortable. You ever done something for a loved one that made you uncomfortable, but you did it because you loved them? If we're truly showing the love of Jesus to non-believers, we have to be willing to address the uncomfortable questions, because that's a soul that's at stake.
Yeah. Just you're making me think about one time I heard a Christian, and truly, there's nothing wrong with this person as a Christian. It's just this one thing that they said. But they were teaching a class, and they said that atheists are stupid. And I remember kind of cringing at hearing that. Like, oh, no, don't say that. There are many intelligent, very intelligent, more intelligent than, many people I know. Intelligent people who are atheists. Okay, so intelligence doesn't necessarily mean that you have everything correct, but we should respect people who disagree with us. We should expect that they're coming at their faith or lack thereof from a genuine place of searching. And we know that the truth has nothing to fear. There's some quotes, the truth having nothing to fear from inquiry. And so because of that, we should not have fear. Now, you might run into someone who is can use $10 words and talk around you all day, and can make you feel small when you're arguing with them. But as Jeremy pointed out, just knowing that the arguments are there, that someone out there has thought about this, you're not the first person to hear the question, it gives us a bit more confidence. I will say that the most intelligent person I've ever heard on apologetics issues is William Lane Craig. And you can go on YouTube and watch his debates. He's even got his own channel where he talks through different issues. And one of my favorite little bits about him is, don't ask me why, but I was looking at an atheist blog where he was going through like 50 different debates that William Lane Craig had with 50 different atheists, including the big ones like Richard Dawkins, Charles Hitchens, and all of the big names that you would have heard of before. And this atheist on his blog said William Lane Craig won every single one of those debates. Now, under that, he says, well, I think it's just because he's a really good debater. I'm sure he is. For the record, William Lane Craig is an excellent debater. But if there wasn't any truth there, would he have won all of those debates? Would even an atheist go away thinking like, if there's some truth there, then maybe there's something to investigate. Anyway, we are running low on time, and I know that there's more to talk about here. Jeremy, what are some other ideas that we need to think about in this context of preparing ourselves to offer an apology?
Well, we need to, excuse me, I think we need to remember this idea we've been hinting at a lot, and we may need to come back to it next week, is this idea of truth. If we are proclaiming truth, and that's the core of the message that we're talking about. So if we're encountering someone who is less than genuine skeptic, they're just out to stir things up. Okay. The questions are still there, and we need to be able to deal with them. If we're dealing with a genuine skeptic, someone who is genuinely seeking the truth, okay, we have the truth. And if we're dealing with someone who is questioning because of an emotional reason, and let's not forget, when we say that the case for Christianity is a reasonable case, that doesn't mean we need to throw aside emotion. God created us with emotions. Okay. So when we encounter someone who is going through an emotional questioning, okay, truth is the foundation that's going to help us deal with those emotions. You ever gone through an emotional roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down? Okay. That truth is kind of the bedrock foundation that'll lock us in no matter where our emotions may go. Okay. So we need to remember that we are defending something that is rock solid truth. And that's what we need to keep coming back to.
Yeah, well said. Closing thoughts. I would say that it's important to look for the best arguments, not only with the side that you agree with, but the side you disagree with as well. So as we're going through this series, we're going to spend some time for lack of a better term, playing devil's advocate, not like the devil needs an advocate, but we're going to do our best to make sure that the other side is represented correctly. One of the biggest harms that you can do to someone who's developing in their faith, or a mature Christian, either way, is to make them think that the other side only has scarecrows, that to present the weakest form of an argument as what the other side believes. You're not doing anyone any favors when you do that, and it's hard. It's hard to grapple with all of these things, and especially to try to do it in 30 minutes. That's why we're going to take 35 minutes every. No, okay, well, we'll see. Anyway, so we are not going to throw up straw men. We're going to try our best not to do that, and hopefully you can hold us accountable to that. With the last few minutes that we have, I feel like this is a series where I'm just going to read off what we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. And Jeremy, I'm going to go through the list that you said. So this first week, we're talking about what is apologetics. Week 2, Jeremy mentioned this one earlier. We're going to talk about since evil and suffering exist, how can a loving God also exist? So the problem of pain and suffering. Week 3, we're going to talk about miracles. Do they contradict science? Week 4, we'll talk about evolution. And if evolution is true, perhaps we do not need God. Week 5, God isn't worthy of worship because, according to the Bible, he kills innocent people. Week 6, it's offensive to claim that Jesus is the only way to God. I actually agree with that one. So, yeah, it's offensive. Okay. All right, anyway, sorry. We'll get to more on that one later. Week 7, a loving God would never torture people in hell. Week 8, church history is littered with oppression and violence. Once again, true. Week 9. So maybe you'll have to defend it against me. Okay. Week 9, even if I still have doubts, can I follow God? And we've got a couple others that'll come after that, but those are the ones we have set in stone. We're looking forward to going through this study. It'll be filled with God's word and making biblical arguments there. So we look forward to joining with you in this conversation. And we've never said this before, and obviously I'm saying this at the end of the video. If you have questions, comments, concerns, feel free to comment on the YouTube video down below, down here. Smash the like button. Tell that algorithm you want to see more, or send us an email, send us a text message, phone call, whatever. We are happy to talk through questions, or ideas, and we'll incorporate those into future videos. So with that, thanks for joining us in this new series, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
See you next week.